The dress was already bought. White lacy with pearl buttons down the back and a veil that looked like it floated. Autumn couldn't explain why she cried when she saw herself in the mirror, but it wasn't from happiness. It was a quiet kind of crying, the kind that doesn't have an obvious reason but comes from deep inside, from some old hidden place. The wedding was just 20 days away, and she still hadn't met her future father-in-law. He lived in Colorado and was only coming for the ceremony. When her fiancé Graydon said his father's name for the first time, Autumn froze. Harlan Beckett. She didn't say a word, just smiled. But inside, her world collapsed. If you love true stories that feel like movies, full of twists, impossible coincidences, and raw emotion, subscribe now. Every video will leave you speechless, because everything we show here is based on real lives. Lives that could be yours. Buckle up, because this story is going to shake you from start to finish. Autumn was raised by her grandmother in Knoxville, Tennessee. Her mother died during childbirth, and all she ever knew about her father was that his name was Harland. Just Harland, no last name. Her grandma used to say he was a coward who ran off before his daughter was even born. Autumn never tried to find him, not out of pride, but out of fear. She was scared of finding something worse than absence, indifference. She grew up with that name echoing in her head, but without a face, without a photo. Nothing to prove he ever really existed. He was like a ghost with a first name. As a teenager, Autumn asked about him again. Her grandmother only said, "He wasn't from here. Tall, skinny, dark hair. Drove trucks. Left before you opened your eyes." That was it. Autumn never pushed further. Not until she met Graydon. They met at an environmental conference in Asheville, North Carolina. He talked about renewable energy with such passion that it made Autumn smile without even realizing it. And he noticed. That same day, they went out for coffee. 3 months later, they were living together. A year later, they were engaged. Graydon was kind, smart, funny. He had this calm way of listening that made Autumn feel safe in a way she never had before. But there was a shadow she never shared with him. The feeling that something from her past was about to erupt. She had no family left besides her grandmother, who passed away 2 years earlier. There was no one to talk to, nowhere to look for answers, until the name Harlan Beckett came up. At first she told herself it had to be a coincidence, but the name was too rare for that. That same night she Googled Harlan Beckett, Colorado, and there he was. Picture, company, resume. He owned a freight transport company, the same job her grandma had mentioned. Autumn stared at the photo on her phone wide-eyed. It was like looking into a mirror, only male, the same jawline, the same shape of the eyes. She nearly dropped the phone, but she didn't say a word. The wedding was too close. What if it was just paranoia? She couldn't ruin everything without knowing for sure. The next day, she emailed the Denver County Clerk's office, asked for a copy of Graydon's birth certificate, pretended it was for the marriage paperwork. When the document arrived 3 days later, her heart nearly stopped. Father, Harlan Beckett, born in Knoxville, Tennessee. Autumn dropped to the kitchen floor. The email slipped from her hands. The tears came without warning. But there was still one question she couldn't bear to face. What if she and Graydon were siblings? For 3 nights straight, Autumn couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, listening to Graydon's calm breathing beside her, trying to imagine the worst. What if it's true? What if he's my brother? The thought felt absurd, horrifying, but the fear was real. She thought about the mother she never knew, the grandmother who never wanted to talk about her father, thought about all the coincidences that, at some point, stopped feeling like coincidences. She needed proof, but more than that, she needed the truth. The next morning, Autumn called a genetic testing lab in Knoxville. They offered private tests, no doctor's referral needed. She made an appointment and told Graydon she was visiting a sick friend. She took his hairbrush, the one he kept on the bathroom counter, and tucked it deep into her purse, guilt heavy in her eyes. She took the test herself at the lab. When the woman asked if it was for paternity, she replied with a sad smile, something like that. The results would take 7 to 10 days. Autumn spent that time like an actress in a play she hated. She wore the costume of the happy bride, replied to bridesmaids' texts, went for dress fittings. But inside, her heart was a dark room full of voices. Graydon noticed. One night, he asked if she was okay. She hesitated for a second, then lied. Said she was just missing her grandmother with the wedding getting so close. He believed her and hugged her tightly. On the 8th day, the email came. Autumn opened it in bed, laptop on her lap. The document was clear. Probable degree of relationship 0%. No genetic connection between tested individuals. She covered her mouth with her hand and started to cry, quietly sobbing. The relief was so intense it almost hurt. Graydon wasn't her brother. There was no blood tie between them. But that only led to another question. Then why did his father have the same name as hers? The next morning, she called the freight company's office in Colorado and asked to speak with Mr. Harland. They said he was out on a trip but would be back next week for his son's wedding. Autumn hung up without leaving a message. Her heart was still racing. She needed to see him in person. She needed to look him in the eyes. Something didn't add up. Maybe the coincidence wasn't between her and Graydon. Maybe the connection was only with his father. At the wedding rehearsal, Harland Beckett finally arrived. Autumn spotted him from a distance, stepping out of a black SUV with his sunglasses hooked on his shirt and neatly combed gray hair. He greeted family friends with a wide smile, but the moment he looked at Autumn, he froze. His eyes narrowed like he was seeing a ghost. Autumn's stomach turned. He walked over slowly, trying to play it cool, shook her hand like she was just another bride. But she saw it. He knew who she was. At dinner, Harland kept sneaking glances at her. Autumn tried to stay calm, but sweat trickled down her back. When Graydon was called to go over details with the pastor, she saw her chance. She followed Harland out to the porch. He lit a cigarette and pretended not to notice her. Autumn leaned on the railing and said it flat out. "I think you're my father." Harland froze. The cigarette shook in his fingers. She said it again. It took him 10 seconds to answer. And what he said made her heart stop. "You are Tessa's daughter?" Autumn's legs went weak. That was the first time in her life she'd ever heard her mother's name spoken by someone who had actually known her. Harland didn't look shocked. He looked ashamed. He stared at the ground, rubbed his forehead hard and let out a long sigh, like a man surrendering to a past he'd tried to bury. "I was so young. Tessa came into my life and disappeared just as fast. I didn't even know she was pregnant." Autumn listened in silence, her chest tightening like some old door had suddenly been thrown open. She asked why he'd never tried to find her. Harland hesitated, said he'd been living in another city back then, always on the road, with nothing to his name. "I only heard about her through rumors after the funeral, but by then it was too late. And I had Graydon. I had a new life." Autumn felt her blood run cold. She wanted to scream, cry, hit him, but she did none of that. She just stood there, listening to this man who, for some reason, looked even more lost than she felt. He tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled back. "You should have tried. I spent my whole life thinking I was nothing." Harland nodded quietly. "I know, and there's no excuse for that." For a moment, everything fell silent. Autumn could hear only the distant laughter coming from inside the house. Her fiancé's father was the father she'd never had. That changed everything. Or maybe it changed nothing. She still didn't know. But then a terrifying thought took hold of her, growing louder by the second. What if Harland was lying? What if he'd known all along? What if marrying Graydon had been his way of getting close to her in some twisted, sick way? She walked back into the house with her mind on fire. Graydon wrapped his arms around her from behind, completely unaware of the storm behind her eyes. "You okay?" Autumn forced a smile. "Just tired." But inside she wanted to run. Not from the wedding, not from Graydon, but from the secret that now felt even more incomplete. Because if Harland had known about Tessa, why had he never told his son? Why had Graydon grown up thinking he was an only child? Autumn needed answers, and she couldn't get them alone. In the middle of the night while Graydon slept, Autumn slipped into the office Harland was using as a guest room. She searched through folders and envelopes until she found a wooden box with a lock. It was locked, but the key was in the nightstand drawer. Inside were letters. Old letters, yellowed envelopes, all addressed to Tessa Monroe, all signed, "With love, Harland." She spent the night reading every single one. Harland had written like a man in love, said he'd come back, that he wanted to raise their daughter together, that he just needed one more month on the road. The last letter read, I hope one day she can forgive me for not coming back in time." Autumn cried silently. Letters spread across the floor. The story was different now. Harland had known. Harland had loved. But Harland had failed. By sunrise, she knew what she had to do. She needed to talk to Graydon, but not about his father. About something else. Something that was about to explode and change everything between them. Because at the end of the last letter, there was a photo. And in the photo, Tessa was smiling, holding a newborn baby. And standing beside her, with a hand on her shoulder, was a woman Autumn recognized instantly. It was Graydon's adoptive mother, the woman he always called Aunt Clara. Autumn stared at the photo like time had stopped. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Graydon had always said Aunt Clara was his mom's sister. But what if she wasn't? What if she'd been something else entirely? Autumn remembered how Clara always dodged questions about the past, how she'd changed the subject whenever Graydon's mother was brought up. That photo changed everything. Clara had known Tessa, and Clara was holding Autumn as a baby in that faded picture. At breakfast, Autumn couldn't look anyone in the eye. Every bite felt like swallowing another lie. Harland watched her from across the room, tense like he already knew she'd found something. Graydon was full of excitement, buzzing about last-minute wedding details, completely unaware of the storm brewing. Autumn couldn't wait any longer. She had to talk to Clara. That afternoon, she took the car and drove an hour to Clara's house. When she arrived, Clara was in the garden, watering plants like everything was fine. Autumn held up the photo without saying a word. Clara froze. The hose slipped from her hand. "Where did you get that?" Autumn's voice was firm. "In Harland's box. Why are you with my mom? Why are you with Tessa on the day I was born?" Clara hesitated. Her eyes welled up. "I wanted to tell you. I just never had the courage. It was an agreement. Between him and me." Autumn felt sick. "You held me as a baby, and let me grow up thinking I had no one. Why?" Clara led her inside, locked the door, and sank into an armchair like her legs had given out. "Tessa was my friend. I met her in Knoxville. When she got pregnant, Harland promised he'd take care of both of them, but he vanished. Tessa was on her own. When she died giving birth, I was at the hospital. I was supposed to take you, but your grandmother got to you first. She hated me, thought I was part of Harland's disappearance." Autumn could barely breathe. "And Graydon, is he my brother?" Clara shook her head. "No, Graydon is Harland's son with another woman. He was born 2 years after you. I was his godmother. His mom died young, and Harland asked me to raise him like my own. That's why he calls me Aunt Clara. But we're not related by blood." Autumn leaned against the wall, equal parts relieved and wrecked. Her whole life was tangled with the life of the man she was about to marry. But the lies were too big to ignore. And now she had a choice to make. Tell Graydon everything, or let the past stay buried. On the drive home, Autumn pulled over and cried for 10 full minutes until there were no tears left. When she finally got back, Harland was standing on the porch, like he knew she'd be different now. "You went to see Clara, didn't you?" She nodded. "Why did you all hide this from me? Why didn't anyone give me the right to know?" Harland stepped closer, his eyes glossy. "Because I thought it was too late. And when it wasn't, I was scared. Scared you'd hate me. Scared I'd ruin my son's life too." Autumn whispered. "You ruined mine." But before Harland could say anything, the front door flew open. It was Graydon. His face was pale. In his hands, he held the photo Autumn had dropped in the car. He looked at the two of them like he'd just been betrayed. Why is my aunt in a photo with my fiance's mother on the day she was born?" The silence was heavy as stone. Autumn tried to speak, but her voice gave out. Graydon turned to his father. "What are you two hiding from me?" And in that moment, no one had an answer. Graydon stepped in slowly, his face stunned. Autumn followed him, trying to reach for his hand, but he pulled away. "Explain this to me, Autumn. Tell me this isn't what it looks like." She swallowed hard, struggling to breathe. "I didn't know until a few days ago, I swear. I found out on my own. I thought you might be my brother." Graydon's eyes widened. He took another step back. "What?" Autumn rushed to explain, her voice trembling. "But we're not. I took a DNA test, Graydon. You and I, we're not related by blood. I had to know the truth, so I went after it." Harland tried to step in. "Son, listen. This isn't her fault, it's mine. I should have told you a long time ago. Graydon turned to his father, fury in his eyes. You made me believe my mother died and left nothing behind. You never said a word about Tessa. You never told me you had another daughter, that she was alive. Harland looked small, crushed under the weight of his choices. I regretted it, Gray. But by the time I tried to make it right, it felt too late. I saw you two together, happy, and I couldn't bring myself to destroy that. Autumn felt his words cut straight through her. Graydon dropped onto the couch, running his hands through his hair. This changes everything. My dad is my fiancé's father. I almost married my sister. Autumn dropped to her knees beside him. But we're not siblings. We're not. The test proves it. He looked at her, pain flooding his eyes. But you're his daughter. You're the daughter of the man who lied to me my entire life. Autumn looked down. And you're the son of the woman he chose after leaving me behind. We're both just scars from the choices he made. The silence between them was thick until Graydon finally stood up. I need time to think. Autumn wanted to stop him, but she knew she couldn't. Harland opened his mouth, but Graydon was already out the door. It slammed shut behind him. Autumn stood frozen, unsure if he would ever come back. That night, she locked herself in her room and cried until sleep pulled her under. When she woke, there was a letter under the door. It was from Harland. Her hands trembled as she read it. It was a letter of apology, but the final line stole her breath. I did this once. I won't do it again. This time I'm disappearing by choice. By the next morning, Harland was gone. Not at the house, not at the hotel. No one knew where he'd gone. Autumn tried calling him, but his phone was off. Graydon had vanished too. 3 days passed without a word. Autumn canceled the wedding plans, canceled the caterer, the flowers, the band. Each call felt like a punch to the chest. She didn't have the strength to explain. She just said, change of plans. And when people asked why, she hung up. Because how do you explain a story like that? On the 4th day, a message popped up on her phone. It was from Harland's number. Go to the abandoned book depot on Ridgetop Road. There's something there you need to see. Autumn hesitated, but she went. When she arrived, there was an envelope taped to the door with a key inside. Inside the dusty warehouse, surrounded by old boxes and the smell of time, she found a black box. And inside it, letters. Dozens. Hundreds. All written by Tessa. Addressed to Harland. Never sent. Saved by Clara all those years. And one of them revealed a secret Autumn never saw coming. Autumn's hands shook as she opened letter after letter. Her mother's handwriting was gentle, almost mournful, like she was writing to someone she knew might never reply. The early letters spoke of love for Harland, hope that he'd come back. But over time, the ink grew heavier, the words sharper, shorter paragraphs, sharper edges. You left me pregnant and disappeared. I don't know if I hate you or still love you. Then one line stopped Autumn cold. If you ever read this, I want you to know I'm not raising our daughter alone. There's someone else now. Someone else? Autumn searched for more and found a letter dated 3 months before her birth. He promised he'd take care of us if you didn't come back. Said he'd raise her, not because she's his, but because he loves us. Autumn froze. The words rang in her head like thunder. If you don't come back, he will. There was someone else. Another man. Someone who might have been her father. A name showed up in the next letters. Elliot. She'd never heard that name before. She scanned the letters desperately for more clues. In one of the last ones, Tessa wrote, Elliot took me to Nashville. Said it was better for us to start fresh there. But I couldn't do it. I'm still waiting for you, even though I know you won't come. Autumn's heart was pounding. Nashville. That's where her grandmother lived before taking her to Knoxville. What if Elliot had been real? What if he'd stayed close, never knowing what happened to the baby Tessa had? She had to find out. And now, she knew where to start. The next day, she returned to Clara's house. Knocked hard. When Clara opened the door, Autumn didn't wait. Who is Elliot? Clara went pale, tried to deny it. But Autumn pushed. Tessa wrote about him in the letters, said she went with him to Nashville. Clara looked down. Elliot Davies, he was a musician. Played saxophone at a small bar. He loved your mom. When Harland vanished, he stepped up. But your grandmother hated him. Autumn's voice was tight. Do you know where he is now? Clara nodded slowly. Still in Nashville. Lives in a neighborhood called Sylvan Park. Fixes instruments for a living. Never married. Never had kids. Autumn felt the ground shift under her. She took the address, thanked Clara, and left without looking back. She drove the 3 hours to Nashville. Sylvan Park was quiet, blooming with summer light. It felt like stepping into a dream. And there, on a corner tucked between 2 trees, was the shop, Davies Repairs and Vintage Instruments. She walked in slowly, her heart pounding. A thin man with gray-streaked beard and kind eyes looked up over his glasses. "Can I help you?" Autumn hesitated. "Are you Elliot?" He nodded. She swallowed. "My name is Autumn. Autumn Monroe." He lowered his glasses slowly, stunned. "Monroe? Tessa? You're Tessa's daughter?" Autumn nodded, eyes filling with tears. Elliot stepped forward, hands shaking. "My God, I searched for you for years. Your grandmother told me you died at birth." Autumn broke down. In that hug she felt, for the first time, that maybe she had never really been abandoned. But Elliot had more to say, something that would change everything. He held her hand and whispered, "Autumn, I didn't just love your mom. I was with her at the hospital. I held you when you were born. And before she passed, Tessa put my name on your birth certificate. It was only afterward that your grandmother changed everything." Autumn's eyes widened. "What?" Elliot nodded. "Legally, you're my daughter. You always were." Autumn sat down in the little shop, unsure whether to cry or laugh. It was like the floor beneath her cracked open to reveal a whole new path. You're my dad?" she asked, stunned. Elliot smiled, tears in his eyes. "If blood makes a father, maybe not. But if it's love, care, and years of waiting, then yes, I am." She looked around at the quiet shop, filled with saxophones and guitars, and felt something old and painful inside her begin to dissolve. Elliot showed her a cardboard box filled with tiny keepsakes he'd saved over the years. A pacifier, a baby shoe, a faded photo of Tessa pregnant, and a hospital bracelet that read, "Autumn Davies. She wanted you to have my name. Before she passed, she looked at me and said, 'She'll be your daughter too, even if the whole world says otherwise.'" Autumn held the bracelet tightly, imagining that moment, imagining what her mother would feel now, seeing all of this unfold. 2 days later, they returned to Knoxville together. Autumn had to tell Graydon everything, not just about Elliot, but about what she now understood, that maybe everything, every lie, every silence, had led her here. When she got home, there was an envelope on the door. It was from Graydon, just 2 pages, handwritten, steady but sad. "Autumn, I love you, but I need to figure out who I am before I can walk forward with you. We were dragged into our parents' past. Now we need to choose our own future." She read it with her heart aching. His words held no anger, just pain, but also hope. If time doesn't wash us away, maybe we'll find each other on the right side of the story. She kept that letter like it was part of her. Weeks passed. She visited Elliot often, learned how to run the shop with him. They laughed, cried, and slowly built something new. She, who had never had a father, now had someone who played music just for her at the end of the day. It was on one of those late summer afternoons in August that Graydon walked through the door. He wore that same soft smile he always had when he needed to say something important. Autumn froze, but then smiled back. He greeted Elliot. "I needed to see you happy. Really happy." Autumn nodded. "And you?" Graydon sighed. "I'm rebuilding, but I missed you along the way." Elliot quietly stepped away, leaving them alone among the instruments. Autumn took a deep breath. "Do you think there's still a path for us?" Graydon moved closer. "If it's a new one. No lies. No old wounds. Just us." Autumn nodded. "Just us." And in that moment, for the first time in a very long time, everything made sense. She hadn't just found a father. She had found herself. And when she walked out of that little shop with Graydon by her side, the sun felt warmer, brighter, because the past, with all its pain, was no longer a prison. It was just the beginning of something new, something real, something finally hers.